In the year 400 AD, Rome was still the greatest city on earth. More than 1,000,000 souls lived within its walls. Its marble temples, its triumphal arches, its immense aqueducts. These were the monuments of a civilization that believed it would last forever. But forever, it turned out, was running out. For centuries, Rome had been the undisputed mistress of the Western world. But at the dawn of the 5th century, the empire was crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. Military overextension, civil wars, corrupt administrators, and beyond its borders, a world in motion. The great migrations had begun, pushed westward by the Huns sweeping across the steppes of Central Asia. Entire peoples were torn from their lands and hurled against the edges of the Roman world. Among them, the Visigoths. The Visigoths, the Western Goths, had lived north of the Danube in relative peace with Rome. But in 376 AD, fleeing the advance of the Huns, they crossed the Danube and entered Roman territory. Rome permitted it. It needed the manpower. But what followed was a catastrophe of Roman mismanagement. The refugees were exploited, starved, and humiliated by corrupt local officials. In 378 AD, the Visigoths rebelled. At the Battle of Adrianople, they destroyed a Roman army and killed Emperor Valens himself. It was the greatest military disaster Rome had suffered in over a century. And it was from this crucible of war and betrayal that a leader emerged. His name was Alaric. Born around 370 AD, Alaric was a Visigoth of the Bulti dynasty, one of the most prestigious noble families among his people. He had served in the Roman army. He understood Roman strategy, Roman politics, and Roman weakness, and he had a singular ambition: to secure a permanent homeland for his people within the empire and to be recognized as a legitimate Roman military commander. Rome, as it would do repeatedly, underestimated him. He was not merely a plunderer. He was a king with a cause and an army to defend it. Broken promises and a besieged city. At the start of the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was governed from an unlikely place. Not Rome, but Ravenna, a marshy city on the Adriatic coast, chosen precisely because it was difficult to besiege. The emperor who occupied the Western throne was Honorius, and history has not been kind to him. Honorius was not a military man. He was not a statesman. He was a puppet. First of his general Stilicho, a man of half-Vandal descent who was, without question, the last great defender of the Western Empire, and then of scheming palace factions who saw Stilicho as a threat. Alaric had first invaded Italy in 401 AD, pushing through the Alps, only to be repelled by Stilicho at the battles of Pollentia and Verona. A fragile peace followed. Alaric was promised land and money, promises that were never honored. In 408 AD, disaster struck Rome's defenders. Stilicho was arrested and executed on the orders of Honorius, who had been convinced that the general was conspiring with Alaric. The accusation was almost certainly false. With Stilicho dead, the one man capable of managing both the Visigoths and the collapsing frontier was gone. In the autumn of 408 AD, Alaric and his Visigoths descended into Italy and besieged Rome for the first time. What followed was not an assault, it was a stranglehold. The city's supply lines were cut. The Tiber, Rome's lifeline, was blocked. Inside the walls, conditions deteriorated with terrifying speed. Famine gripped the city. The grain ration was cut first by half, then by 2/3. Disease followed famine. The Senate, desperate, negotiated with Alaric. Alaric's demands were enormous: gold, silver, silk, pepper, and, most importantly, land for his people and the title of supreme military commander. After negotiations, he accepted a ransom of 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 pounds of silver, and vast quantities of other goods. The Visigoths withdrew, temporarily, but Honorius refused to negotiate a permanent settlement. He retreated to Ravenna and ignored Alaric's demands. Time and again, peace was within reach. Time and again, Roman political dysfunction destroyed it. Alaric besieged Rome a second time in 409 AD. This time he installed his own emperor, Priscus Attalus, a puppet ruler meant to pressure Honorius. That gambit also failed. Attalus proved useless. Alaric deposed him. By the summer of 410 AD, Alaric had exhausted his patience. He had been betrayed, ignored, ridiculed. His people still had no land. His legitimacy was still unrecognized. He returned to Rome, not to negotiate, but to take. 3 sieges, 3 years. 3 times Rome had refused to negotiate. On the 4th, Alaric would not knock on the door. August 24th, 410 AD. Before dawn, the Salarian Gate, one of Rome's great northern entrances, was opened from the inside. The Visigoths poured into the Eternal City. What followed were 3 days of plunder. The Visigoths stripped the city of its wealth. Treasures from the imperial palaces, gold from aristocratic mansions, relics, silver, silk. The treasury of the Church of St. Peter was looted. The aristocratic mansions on the Aventine and Celian hills were stripped bare. And yet, and this is historically significant, the sack was not a total massacre. Alaric, who had converted to Arian Christianity along with most of his people, gave orders that Christian basilicas were to be spared and that civilians who sought sanctuary within them were to be protected. The great churches of St. Peter and St. Paul were designated as places of refuge. Many Romans survived precisely because of this. Contemporary sources describe Visigoths escorting terrified Roman women to the safety of the Basilica of St. Peter. But there's no doubt it was still a catastrophe. The city bled. Slaves fled in the chaos. Prominent Romans were seized and held as hostages. The homes of senators were violated. The accumulated wealth of centuries was carted away. Jerome, writing from Bethlehem when the news reached him, could barely find words. The greatest city in the world, the city from which civilization itself had radiated for 8 centuries, had fallen. The shock that rippled through the Roman world cannot be overstated. Rome had not been taken by a foreign enemy since the Gauls under Brennus in 390 BC. 800 years before. 800 years of invincibility, gone in 3 days. Augustine of Hippo, one of the greatest minds of the age, heard the news in North Africa. He would spend the next 13 years writing his masterpiece, The City of God, in direct response, wrestling with the question of how God could allow Rome to fall. It remains one of the foundational texts of Western philosophy. August 24th, 410 AD. The gates of the Eternal City swung open, and the world would never be the same. After 3 days, Alaric led his Visigoths out of Rome and moved south. His ultimate goal was to cross into North Africa, the empire's breadbasket, and secure there a permanent base from which to negotiate from a position of unassailable strength. He never made it. As the Visigoths reached Reggio, at the very tip of Italy's boot, a storm destroyed the fleet they had assembled. The crossing to Africa was blocked. Alaric turned north again, and somewhere near the town of Cosenza, in Calabria, in the late autumn of 410 AD, he fell ill and died. His followers diverted the course of the Bisendo River, buried their king in the riverbed along with treasures from Rome, then restored the river's flow and killed the slaves who had done the work, so that the location of his tomb would never be known. It has never been found. Command of the Visigoths passed to Adolf, Alaric's brother-in-law. In the years that followed, the Visigoths moved north into Gaul and eventually settled in Aquitaine, in southwestern Gaul, the territory Alaric had always sought. In 418 AD, the Roman government formally recognized them as a federated kingdom. It was, in bitter irony, almost exactly what Alaric had asked for from the very beginning. The sack of 410 AD did not destroy Rome immediately. The city survived. Its population recovered, at least partially. The buildings still stood. But something essential had been destroyed. Not stone or mortar, but the idea. The idea that Rome was inviolable, that its walls were the walls of civilization itself, that beyond them lay chaos, and within them, eternal order. That idea died on August 24th, 410 AD. In the decades that followed, the Western Empire continued its long unraveling. More sacks would come. The Vandals under Genseric in 455 AD would plunder Rome for 14 days. In 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor would be deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer, not with great drama, but with the quiet stroke of a pen. The myth of Roman invincibility, 800 years in the making, died in 3 days. History is rarely made in a single moment. Empires do not fall in an afternoon. Civilizations do not end with a single sunset. But sometimes there is a hinge, a day when the before and the after become visible. August 24th, for 10 AD was that hinge. It marked not merely the defeat of an army, or the looting of a treasury. It announced to the world that the age of Roman certainty was over, that the peoples Rome had so long dismissed as barbarians were capable not only of threatening the empire, but of walking into its sacred heart and taking what they found there. Alaric himself was a contradictory figure, a man who had served Rome, who admired Rome, who had spent his life trying to find a place within Rome's world, and who, having failed at that, became the instrument of its greatest humiliation. He did not hate Rome. He wanted to belong to it. Rome's tragedy was that it could not bring itself to let him. In the centuries after 410, Europe would be remade. New kingdoms would rise from the ruins of the Western Empire. The Visigoths, the Franks, the Ostrogoths, the Burgundians, all would carve out territories where Roman provinces had once existed. Latin would splinter into Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. Christianity, now freed from a single imperial center, would multiply and spread. The world that emerged from the wreckage of the Western Roman Empire was not simply a smaller Rome. It was something new. It was medieval Europe, and its birth, as painful and convulsive as it was, can be traced in large part to a single August morning when the gates of a city swung open and the impossible became real.